Hey, what's going on everybody, and welcome back to the Whiskey Cove. And on today's episode, we're going to play a little bit of a game here. That game is, does Old Grandad 114 beat? Let's find out. Hey, what's going on everybody? Welcome back to the show, and welcome back to another new and exciting episode of the Whiskey Cove, where we will be playing a game and asking the question, does Old Grandad 114 beat? And then we'll be given certain bottles, and I don't know which of these bottles are. They're going to be pulled out from behind the bar by my wife, and then she's going to present me with one at a time, and then I'll need to make a quick deduction if Old Grandad 114 beats those bottles on palate alone. So when I first got into Old Grandad 114, I thought it was a little bit too spicy. Love the bonded, love the straight bourbon whiskey. That's like my favorite budget bourbon right there. However, I felt the 114, the 114, however you want to call it, was a little bit too spicy. But I went back to this very recently, and something magical has happened. That spice level has come down a little bit, and it's created a really great balance across the board. It has the proof. It has some of those stone fruits that have come forward and stepped in. It has some of that spice, but that's more rounded out and a little bit more tame. The drinkability factor's there. It's a very sexy bottle, if I don't say so myself. And it's also cheap as can be. It's going to set you back a couple of beers at the pub, maybe going out and getting a Five Guys burger, I guess. That stuff is like super expensive now. What is it, like 20 bucks for a burger and a drink? An extra $10, you can get this bottle. So we will ask the question, does Old Grandad 114 beat? But before we do, if you haven't already, go over to the Whiskey Cove's website, thewhiskeycove.square.site. The link is down below in the description, where you can pick up some excellent, beautiful Whiskey Cove engraved glasses. These are all done as close to cost that I can, with shipping sent to your door. Absolute phenomenal prices. Definitely go and check us out there. And you are supporting me by getting the glasses as well, so I really appreciate that. We have a bunch of different stuff over there. Also as well, really trying to ramp up Patreon here. We've rejigged there, we've brought in some new stuff. As soon as I edit these videos, which is usually a couple of weeks in advance, I post them straight to Patreon. So the Patreon members have all access to that. You can also join our WhatsApp group to have kind of direct access to me and post some pictures about what you're drinking. And then also, you also have a bi-yearly, for the virtuoso above, your bi-yearly sample drops, and we just dropped a sample, and that was the Smoke Wagon single barrel. That was Old Carton. That was the Whiskey Cove's Maker's Mark blend, where we blended all the wood finishing series together. So we just dropped a lot of that for a lot of the patrons. So thank you if you are a patron, and I'm sure you've got the samples by now. And also a couple of you who have been Patreon members for 6 months, thank you for your support. You also got the free Glencairns as well. So go over to Patreon/The Whiskey Cove. The link is down below as well, and check out some of the offerings and come and join the community. We really appreciate their support. With that being said, let's get into today's video, where we will ask the question, is Old Grandad 114 better than these bourbons, which we'll find out here. So first off, we have a glass of Old Grandad in front of us, so we can just remind ourselves as we go through these whiskies. Maybe we can have a little taste and make sure we make an accurate decision as best we can. So how many bottles do we have? So we have about 15 bottles, and I've told my wife to pick, a variety of different bottles. Try to make sure that they're all bourbon as best you can. Try to hopefully get some that are a little bit higher proof, but ultimately just a little bit of everything works. So bottle number 1, please. Oh, interesting. That is an interesting bottle. We have Elijah Craig Barrel Proof. This is the C919. I'm gonna pick this as something that I think that is gonna be just like, it represents the barrel proof from Elijah Craig in general. So this is a really tough one, because Elijah Craig makes some excellent barrel proofs. Think of the most recent one, the C923 was awesome. The C920 is phenomenal. The B520 is my pick of the bunch. However, there's some ones that are just kind of like mediocre, like the A123 and the B523 for me personally in my palate. So I know this is the first one, but I'm going to firmly sit on the fence and say it is better than some, but it's worse than others. So yes and no, I guess, with this first one, Elijah Craig Barrel Proof. Next up, we have, oh, this is a good one, Wild Turkey Rare Breed. There are a bunch of absolute die-hard Wild Turkey Red Breed fans out there, and that is for good reason. So Old Grandad's proof is 57% ABV, and I think this is pretty close, right? This is 58.4, so very similar. The price point, this is the Red Breed's a little bit higher, double you could say, a little bit maybe harder to find. I'll be honest, I think I prefer the Old Grandad 114. And the only reason I hesitated, I guess, a little bit was because, like I said, the price point is double, and there's a big following, cult following for the rare breed barrel proof. But for me personally, I prefer the 114. So that's, I guess, 1-0 to Old Grandad 114. Next up, we have Russell Single Barrel Reserve. So again, much like the Elijah Craig barrel proofs, I think we can take this into account as single barrels in general. I think that the Russell's Reserve single barrels as a whole, I think it's better than Old Grandad. The ABV is really close, 55 to 57%, but I just think as a standard, we already give the win over rare breed, the barrel proof, so we'll give the win to the Russell single barrels on this one. I just think that even though you have variety between the single barrels, as a standard, the very high standard, I would say that the worst single barrel that I've had by Russell's has been almost the same or better than the rare breed. So I just don't think it's as good, anywhere near as good as the 114 as a general. So 1-1 we have. Next up, oh my God, we have Blanton's. So I actually think the Blanton's is a pretty solid whiskey on its own. You know, it gets a bad reputation just because it's so hard to find. You might end up paying a lot of money for it as well, but just as a bourbon on its own, it's quite pleasant, it's easy to drink, you can drink it on a school night. However, Old Grandad 114 is much more complex, has higher proof as well, and is just a more interesting drink to enjoy. Old Grandad takes the W on this. It is 2-1 Old Grandad. Next up we have, interesting, Baker 7. You could say Baker 7 is Old Grandad, is more similar, I guess, to Old Grandad Bonded. I think Old Grandad Bonded and Baker 7 share a lot of similarities. They're both made by Jim Beam, the Old Grandad series and the Baker series. I would say that 114 has a little bit more wood characteristic to it. I don't know the age. Some people say that the Old Grandad 114 is the cast strength Basil Hayden's. I think it has the same mash bill, so it could potentially be that. I'm going to give Old Grandad the win on this one. I think it is a better whiskey. I think it's very similar to Baker 7, but I think you get a little bit more of a higher proof, and I think that helps. It is, what is that, 3-1? Yeah, 3-1 to Old Grandad so far. Next up, we have, interesting, Jack Daniel's Barrel Proof. This is not a bourbon, this is a Tennessee whiskey, coming in at 64.9%. So we have a big boy. We have 12, 13 proof ABV points higher. I'm going to give it to Jack Daniel's Barrel Proof. Jack Daniel's is a much superior whiskey for my palate. I prefer the sweeter like a candied pecan note that I get from this, the walnut bread, the banana bread. It's a phenomenal, it has cherry notes there as well. Even coming in at $50 to $60, it's still better, and it's a phenomenal whiskey for that price. It's 3-2, it's getting close again. Next up, oh, interesting. I think I've been saying, oh, interesting about every one of these so far. Old Carter Straight Bourbon Whiskey. Oh, this is a good one because it's 58% ABV, so only 1% ABV higher than 114. This is the first batch that came to Colorado. This is the small batch, never filtered. $200 bottle of whiskey right here. Old Grandad, $30. I think Old Grandad better. I really do. I think that this particular Old Carter had a lot of youth in it, a lot of off-stringent, like yeasty, bready notes that made for a little bit of an unpleasant experience. You don't get that with the refined Old Grandad. He's been around a few years, he knows what it's all about. Old Grandad takes the win against a $200 craft bourbon. Wow, it just goes to show when you put things next to each other into context that maybe sometimes that $200 bottle of whiskey, it just isn't worth it. It is 4-2 Old Grandad. Next up, and we have Caribou Crossing Single Barrel Canadian. So this is a Canadian whiskey, it's not a bourbon, but we'll still roll with it here. 40% ABV or 40% ABV or 80 proof. So I've never liked this. This is an easy win for Old Grandad to take 5-2 because I've just never liked this. Yes, it looks like a cool bottle because it is a cool bottle, it has a cool stopper, but it's very paint stripper-esque. It reminds me of like the Traveler's whiskey that came out and we did a not so great review on. Not a good bottle of whiskey. Easy win for Old Grandad. Can't believe we're in 5-2 against Old Grandad where everything's been much more expensive. Next up, oh, are you kidding me? Old Grandad Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey, the high rye mash bill, the budget buster, the 40% ABV or 80 proof. I actually really like this bottle. I think it has some of the best nose for a whiskey bottle under like $20. It's really, really good. However, if we were judging it on the nose alone, this one would win. However, the palate kind of falls off a cliff a little bit. It's Old Grandad again. It's Old Grandad 114 this time for the win. And that makes it 6-2. Why am I taking this? 6-2. Look at this. We have Bomburgers. This is the 2023 release, coming in at 54% ABV or 108 proof. This is so good. This was one of the whiskeys of the Whiskey Cove of the year last year for very good reason. It is a complete small batch Kentucky Straight Bourbon whiskey, has a new charred American oak, so subtle to drink but has a bursting with flavors. This takes the win in style. We are at 6-3, and is there room for a comeback? I guess we will wait and see. The only problem with Bomburgers, it's going to cost you about $100, where this is $30. So, you know, budget as best you can, but still a much better bourbon in my opinion. Oh, this is going to be a fairly easy one. And that's not because of Old Grandad, that's because this is Stag Junior. And if we're just taking Stag Juniors across the board into account, MSRP $50 to $70 is kind of where we're at on that right now. As a whole, every Stag has just been a hitter. They're the ones I've tried. Even the single barrels have just been phenomenal. ABV generally sits around 65%, but can go up with the single barrels to even hazmat at 70%. Stag absolutely smashes it home, just because Stag is like top 5 of my everyday whiskey, so to speak. It is a phenomenal whiskey, and Old Grandad just didn't really, 114 just didn't really stand up to much of a chance in this one. It is 6-4, and it is getting fun. Next bottle, please. Oh, Wild Turkey 101. 101 representing the 101 proof that's in the bottle, or 50.5% ABV. Wild Turkey 101 is a phenomenal bottle for its price point. When it gets battling up to maybe some of the more expensive whiskies, which Old Grandad 114 isn't, it loses its way a little bit. Before the price of like $20 to $30 or $20 to $25, it's an A+ every time. I'm gonna give this to Old Grandad 114. I think Old Grandad, even though it's a little bit more pricey, has a little bit more proof, and there's just more of a characteristic to it that I prefer, that woody kind of a cinnamon backbone that really does balance itself out quite well. Old Grandad takes it, so that takes us to 7-4 with 3 bottles left. Is there a way back? Let's wait and see. This one next? Okay, cool. That is well a full proof. An absolute staple here of the Whiskey Cove. We love this stuff. Italian cream, Di Serrano, cherry, creme brulee. It is a phenomenal bottle. Sadly, an easy victory for the well of full proof in this one. What I like about full proof, it's the same ABV. Look at that, 57% ABV. It's just more of a complete, well-rounded product. Old Grandad gets you there. Well, a full proof just takes over and takes you to another level. That wins it for this. That is 7-5, 2 bottles left. Next up, Maker's Mark Cask Strength, coming in at 56.25%, so very similar on ABV. This is a wheated bourbon, where this is a high rye bourbon. I'm a big fan of wheated bourbons. I'm a big fan of Maker's Mark, and I'm a big fan of Maker's Mark Cask Strength. We did the Maker's Mark blind, where we blinded a bunch of Maker's Mark, and this Cask Strength finished second. It's not as good, I would say, as the Weller Full Proof, but it is an excellent bourbon in its own right. I'm going to have to give it to Maker's Mark Cask Strength. Yes, it's double the cost maybe, very similar ABV, but it's very, very flavorful. You don't get as much of the kind of high rye spice there. You do get a little bit like that wheaty, oaky spice, but when Maker's Mark put out products, the consistency in the whiskey always blows my brains. If you haven't already, definitely check out the BRT02, because that just takes it to another level. However, it is 7-6, and I promise you, we did not make this happen on purpose. That leaves us with 1 bottle of whiskey left. What is that bottle? Put it in my hand. Well, a single bottle. You know what you should have chose? You should have chose the CYBD, because I think that would have been a little bit more close here. And I think you only chose this because you know how much money this costs. This is 48.5%. ABV 97 proof, and sadly it still doesn't nose that great. I think I've said quite a lot about Weller single barrel on this channel. I think that it's not the barrel's fault, it's not the whiskey's fault, it's not Buffalo Trace's fault. It's just it's a very rare bottle, so it gets marked up constantly to hundreds and hundreds of dollars, and it's just not worth it. Go out and get a Weller Special Reserve or a Weller Special Reserve single barrel if you can find them. And it's just not worth the money. Old Grandad wins, and that takes it to 8-6. 8-6 was the victory, the victory line for Old Grandad. Really close in the end. And if you think about the amount of money, let's have a little look at some of the stuff that it beat. Well, a single barrel, like I said, I can run you like $400 or $500. Wild Turkey 101, okay, that was respectable for Wild Turkey 101. That's like $20 whiskey. Old Grandad, again, very respectable by the regular Old Grandad, like $15 bottle right there. Caribou Crossing single barrel, I think that's like $70, $80 now. Blew the socks off of that. Baker's 7, one was pretty close, but ultimately, you know, the $30 bottle beat the $60 younger brother, if you like. They won there. Blanton's, smash Blanton's, couldn't even get close to it. Yes, Blanton's is good in its own right, but when it came to the complexity of the whiskey, couldn't win against it. Next up, and this might be a little bit of a controversial one, and Old Grandad 114 beat Rare Breed in my opinion. I think that this is a better whiskey than that one. However, if you're someone who prefers Wild Turkey distillate, these are very similar in that aspect, then you will maybe enjoy this one. But for me, Old Grandad took it. And then lastly, Old Grandad beat Old Carter, a $200 bottle of bourbon. I just think that this is more complex, more fun to drink, and this is not the youthful notes that I got from this. Albeit we've tried some other Old Carters before that have been pretty good. Really hard for me to compare that right now to this. However, against this one, it beat it. So these are the 8 bottles that I think that Old Grandad 114 is better than. Let me know down in the comments below if you agree with some of this crazy talk, or if you agree with me. Like I said, very pleased at how well this is opened up. 114 proof, 57% ABV, $30, mostly findable everywhere. Do not sleep on Old Grandad 114. It is one of the jewels in the basement bargain crown that is the $20 to $30 market. As we drink through the world's whiskies, one glass at a time, cheers.